Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. Got an interesting episode for you today here. Usually, obviously, we feature records, sometimes CDs. We're going to be looking at books today. I've got a decent collection of music related books. Some of them I think very interesting. And, all of us who love this music love to learn about it. And so, I'm sure a lot of you guys out there like to read about it. And so I just want to feature some of these books that I think are really interesting and really good. Now I was just going to do like one episode, like on all the real good books I have, and then I was going through them. And I was like, wow, this is like too much. So I'm going to be kind of dividing it up. This will be rock books part one. There'll probably be a part two, maybe a part. I don't know. I don't know if there's a need for a part three, but at least a part two later down the road. Now, I'm not going to do part two as the next video. I can spread them out a little bit. So, maybe in a month or two or three, we could revisit this and get to part two. So I kind of divided them up. The batch that I'm going to talk about today are biographies, autobiographies, or books, about a specific band, or artist. I thought that would be kind of interesting. So it got some good stuff, and I was sort of inspired to do this. If you saw, the video, the last video we did, we did on Bob Dylan, and I started that video off by showing Bob Dylan Chronicles Volume One because I'm sort of in the midst of reading this right now, and that's what sort of inspired me to do the Dylan video that we just did. So also inspired me to kind of go back and look at some of these books. I guess start with the behemoth, right? The Beatles anthology book, the book that went along with, the huge documentary, the video series and all of that, the rarities collections. This is a cool book. This is the first book that I've seen, or that I had seen, that sort of followed this format where it's not like a straight narrative, right? I mean, the whole thing is put together with actual quotes from all the different people involved, and the quotes are just, I mean, it must have taken forever, but kind of edited together chronologically to tell an interesting story. But it's all told through direct quotes, and of course, there are fantastic photos throughout this thing. This was one of my brothers gave this to me one Christmas, I think. It's a huge gift. But yeah, I mean, if for the Beatles fanatic, I think it is essential. And I don't have a ton of Beatles book. The only other notable Beatles book I have, I showed this actually in my Beatles video I did a while back, is Beatles songs. I love this for some reason. I think I've read through this probably 3-4 times, and it takes every single Beatles song and breaks it down, talks about the history, the writing percentages, who wrote what, who played what. There's different comments, and if you really like diving in the minutia, this is fantastic. Called Beatles songs, right there. Now, another book in a similar vein as that Beatles, of course, U2 has to try and do something like that too. And so this is U2 by U2. This is really in the exact same style as that Beatles book, put together with quotes and all that and photos, etc. I have not really, honestly, haven't spent a ton of time with this, but I picked this up somewhere down the line. This is a whole series. I've mentioned this series of books in several videos on different artists. It's that Rough Guide series, and these are the rough guides that I own. I've got Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Rolling Stones, Hendrix, Beatles, Bob Dylan. I know there was a Velvet Underground one, which I don't have, and a Nirvana one, which I'm just not a big fan, so I never picked that up. Those are the only other two that I know of that I don't have. These are all fantastic. I pick up the Zeppelin one, for instance. It's sort of that Rough Guide series. They give you a history of the band, reviews, sort of these really interesting, actually, reviews of every album. Go into a lot of just other details and stuff. So if you're if you're into any of these bands and you can find this, I wish they had done more of these. I don't think there's a ton of other ones out there, but that's a great series. Okay, look at this behemoth. You into King Crimson? About 600 some odd pages. Everything Crimson in the Court of King Crimson. Yeah, this is sort of. I am into King Crimson and into the minutia. So I did read this. I read this all the way through, and it really gets into the weeds. But I mean, if you're a King Crimson person, that's kind of where you want to be, right? I mean, I don't know a lot of casual King Crimson fans, right? Now, sort of connected to that, I do have Bill Bruford's autobiography, which I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't gotten into this all that much. This has gotten rave reviews, and it's kind of non-linear. He sort of jumps all over the place. He does it in the form of like questions. Here's a chapter called "What's It Like Working with Robert Fripp?" Right? Do you still like progressive rock? And let's see. Why did you leave? Yes. So he sort of presents a question in each chapter and then sort of delve. It's sort of stream of consciousness and gets into it all. Another great drummer, Stuart Copeland. This is Strange Things Happen by Stuart Copeland. Great picture there on the back. This is fantastic. I don't know how much you know about Stuart Copeland. He's a really smart, sharp dude. I mean, aside from being a great musician, funny as hell, and he just tells hilarious stories in here, and really rips on Sting sometimes too. It's a good read. That's a good time. I was recently wanting to find something on the Beach Boys, and this was the only thing I was able to find at some used place. Heroes and Villains: The True Story of the Beach Boys. I'd like to find more books on the Beach Boys. This was quite salacious. It told a lot of crazy stories about these guys, and actually spends a lot of time on Dennis Wilson, who of course lived a phenomenally interesting life. In fact, there's a whole chapter in here on his kind of uneasy relationship with Charles Manson and the Manson family. It's a fun read. I mean, this doesn't really dive too much into Brian Wilson's process, and it's much more just sort of biography and, like I said, kind of tabloid stuff. But it's entertaining read, really. Oh, speaking of that, how many of you guys had this? No One Here Gets Out Alive. Biography of Jim Morrison. Man, look at this. I I even have it. Yeah, I think I read this in middle school. Highlighted in there and everything. Oh, this is funny. Where is it? There's this part of it. Yeah, like in the forward. Yeah, yeah. You want to talk like how fawning this is? In the forward, this my personal belief is that Jim Morrison was a god. Yeah. This was also quite salacious, but yeah, kind of a must read. I think. I don't know how true a lot of it is. I know a lot of people have challenged the veracity of some of this stuff in this book, but here's one I read recently. One Way Out: The Inside Story of the Allman Brothers. Again, in the style of that Beatles and U2 book I showed you, where it is told just through quotes of people involved, but it actually really does tell the story very well from start to finish. Although I think this was published before, I think, Greg Allman died. Trying to remember, yeah, but around that time at least. There's a lot of Bowie books. I have this Bowie, Strange Fascination, The Definitive Story by David Buckley. I read this And I'm gonna be honest with you, um, I really don't remember it at all. So I don't remember if that's good. Now this one was good. If you're interested in Gene Clark, Mr. Tambourine Man, the life and legacy of the Byrds, Gene Clark. I mean, one of the great like unsung heroes. Didn't get the recognition he deserved, although he has quite the cult following. And this is really a fantastic um, biography of Gene Clark. Highly recommended there. Let's stay on the cult circuit here. This is a really good book on Big Star. The Short Life, Painful Death, and Unexpected Resurrection of the Kings of Power Pop is the subtitle here. Big Star. This one I think was very good too. This gets into a lot of the details. Let's see. I do have what the Rolling Stones. There's this FAQ series. It goes beyond music. It's a lot of different things. And this is good. Now, this is not one you read, cover to cover, because it's just got a lot of kind of fun facts and stuff in there. So it's kind of one to sort of dive into randomly. All right, stay with me here. This is actually a really good book. Talking about Phil Collins's autobiography, Not Dead Yet, the memoir by Phil Collins. Say what you will about Phil. I actually admire the hell out of the guy. I think untouchable as a drummer. I mean, unimpeachable, fantastic as a drummer. Um, you know, and it's kind of cool because he sort of addresses this, but way overplayed and oversaturated in the '80s. And he's actually really funny about it. I mean, the guy's got a great sense of humor, and he addresses how he was like all over the place in the '80s, and he's like, even I got tired of Phil Collins. I think that's a quote in here. Um, there's a whole chapter in here about the whole Live Aid debacle, where I don't know if you remember, but Phil kind of infamously played in both the London show and the Philadelphia show. I think he started in London. Was it the other way? No, yeah, he started in London. Then he played his little set, then hopped on the the Concorde, flew across the ocean and made it, and then played a little set in Philadelphia. And then he also notoriously was one of the two drummers in that disaster of a Led Zeppelin reunion at a Live Aid. And he's got a whole chapter basically defending himself, saying, "Look, this wasn't my fault. Here's what happened with the Zeppelin thing." And sort of in hindsight, yeah, the whole Concorde thing was really stupid. And I don't. Point is, he's really smart dude and pretty humble, down to earth, and he addresses some hard things, mistakes he's made. And this is a really good book. If you're into rock memoirs, it really is. Okay, getting through here. Got one more little stack here, and then we'll call it a day. I'm into Neil Young. At some point, we're gonna do a mega Neil Young week. I just haven't had the energy to put that together yet. But I got a lot of Neil books. There is a FAQ for Neil Young here. I think I've shown this before. This is really good. The Rolling Stone Files. This is, I think, up through about the mid '90s when this came out, but it's a collection of every article or review in Rolling Stone magazine's history related to Neil Young. It's all collected here in this book, so that's kind of cool. All the interviews, all of it. There's two. There are two great books on Neil Young. This biography called Shaky is fantastic. Probably the best thing I've read on. If you really want to kind of get into Neil's story, this I think is the best thing I've read. It's a really great biography by Jimmy McDonough. Awesome. Although, if you want to hear it from Neil himself, he's written a couple of books actually. I really recommend this, Waging Heavy Peace by Neil Young. This, he it's really interesting what he chooses to focus on. He it's not like proportional to the importance of things. He'll spend 3 4 pages talking about a big train set that he put together. He's real interested in those sort of vintage train sets. There's maybe, or maybe a whole chapter on some train set he meticulously put together, but then I don't know, a page on harvest, recording harvest or something. But don't let that deter you, because this is a fascinating look into a fascinating mind, and really great storyteller. One of the best autobiographies I've read, if you can call it that. Now, he also wrote this, which is Special Deluxe, a memoir of life in cars. Neil has also been very obsessed with cars. And I didn't find this, honestly, I didn't quite finish this. He spends a lot of time talking about cars in this. I I thought this was a lot more engaging. Now, related, this is a pretty nice book on Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. If you want to widen the spectrum and sort of look at all four of the guys and their artistry and conflicts, this is great. This is interesting here. Well, two of these. If you're into the Kinks, I found this one. The Kinks, a very English band, which is, just a good kind of straightforward history of the band. Now, some of you may have read this, which is the unauthorized autobiography. It says, written by Ray Davis about Ray Davis. And it's sort of, it takes an intriguing approach. Part of it is written almost like fiction. He kind of addresses this sort of fictional rock star, but it's really him. And through some of that, he basically tells his version of the story of the Kinks. Anyway, it's called X-Ray. It's an interesting excursion. Let's see. Springsteen. I showed you that Neil Young collection of the Rolling Stone files. There is also a Springsteen Rolling Stone files, which again is a collection of interviews, articles, reviews, pretty much everything where Bruce is involved in Rolling Stone magazine is collected in a book. So it's a good read. This also, I think, cuts off in the mid 90s. I think that's when Rolling Stone put out a series of these books in the mid 90s. Now, like the Neil Young autobiography, the Springsteen autobiography is fascinating. Great storyteller, born to run. I can't tell you how interesting. I mean, this was so interesting, and these two together. I mean, my two favorite artists, right? But both of these really sort of get into the mind, and they tell intriguing stories about their life, right? Another really good storyteller and a really good book, Pete Townshend's autobiography, Who I Am, kind of brutally honest as you might expect Pete to be, including talking about, near the end, he gets into some of those accusations that were in the news a while back, and he addresses them and refutes them in my mind. Oh wow, I had this. I mean, middle school. I bought this. This is interesting. This is the Who Maximum R&B. This is mainly good for a lot of kind of cool photos and stuff in here, but good book on the Who. Okay, the last thing I'll show you in this video, and I'll zip through them quick. Rolling Stone magazine. Again, we like to bash Rolling Stone, and for good reason. But they have put out. You see them like on the newsstands, and checkouts and big grocery stores and stuff. But these, the kind of magazine form, but these collector's editions where they focus on an artist. And I've got a good stack of these. And if you like the artist, they are a great read. This is Bob Dylan, the complete album guide. I got this recently. There's Bruce Springsteen, his 100 greatest songs, where he kind of goes through and tells detailed stories, you know, about the writing of these songs. Here's the ultimate guide to Neil Young from Rolling Stone. This is really good too. Again, a lot of album reviews and stuff in there. This is not Rolling Stone, but it's similar. Complete guide to Led Zeppelin. This one's Rolling Stone. The Ultimate Guide to the Grateful Dead is really good. Here's, the Ultimate Guide to U2, the Ultimate Guide to the Who, the Ultimate Guide to the Beatles, the Ultimate Guide to Bowie, the Ultimate Guide to the Stones, the Ultimate Guide to Tom Petty, the Ultimate Guide to Fleetwood Mac. I showed this one recently, the Ultimate Guide to Pink Floyd. So there's a lot of other ones, but yeah, those are the ones that I've bought over the years. They're all really good reads. So let me wrap this up showing you this little stack here, which I know I have more of these, but I think they're in a box somewhere in the garage. Like going back to the 90s, I try, if a really important artist dies, I try and grab, some of the magazines that are published in the wake of their death, this sort of commemorative stuff. I know I've got more from the 90s into the early 2000s out in the garage somewhere. Like I know I have the Rolling Stone magazine issue when Jerry Garcia died in the 90s. But these are the ones that I kind of had easy access to on my shelf. This one's cool. It's Rolling Stone magazine issue when Merle Haggard died, right? Here's the Rolling Stone magazine issue for Lou Reed when he passed. I picked up a bunch, or several on Bowie. Here's the Rolling Stone magazine issue for when Bowie died. It's Entertainment Weekly for when Bowie died, and then Time Magazine for when Bowie died. And then I've got several here when Prince passed away. Of course, here's the Rolling Stone magazine for Prince. Here's the Newsweek for Prince, and Entertainment Weekly for Prince. Like I said, I know. I think I keep hitting the mic here. I know I have more of those, for deceased, really important artists going into the 90s. But again, somewhere in a garage. Well, all right, guys. I I tried to go really fast through these because there's a lot to look at. Because I didn't want to have a super long video on this. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed some of that. How about in the comments, you guys, share some books that you've read on certain artists or biographies, autobiographies, whatever, that you found really good, really intriguing, great stories. Share them in the comments. Let's talk about them. And like I said, we'll have at least a volume 2 or a part 2 of music books, because I've got a lot of other really interesting books that aren't just artist centric. But I'll save those for another video at some point. So yeah. Well, hope you guys enjoyed that. Please do subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out. Helps us do what we want to do here. And yeah, we'll see you next time on Amity Tracks.